What if Meghan Markle left behind something that was never meant to be seen? Not a press release, not a staged interview, but something handwritten, private, raw. And what if that something has just been found? A royal staffer, an unmarked envelope, a leather-bound journal tucked inside, pages inked with secrets, with fury, with names. Now ask yourself this: what would Meghan Markle write if she didn't think anyone would ever read it? Because someone just did. And what they found? It's enough to make Buckingham Palace call an emergency security meeting. Yes, it's that serious. Whispers of betrayal, veiled insults aimed at Queen Elizabeth and Kate Middleton, private feelings about Harry, hints at hidden recordings, even allusions to something darker, something that risks not just reputations, but national security. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This isn't some tabloid rumor or recycled drama. This is real. This is now. And it's all because of a diary. But before we dive into the ink-stained heart of this bombshell, let's take a step back and ask one question no one in the media seems brave enough to voice. Why was Meghan Markle secretly documenting palace life in the first place? Was it self-defense? Was it premeditated? Or was it always a weapon? Carefully crafted for the day she'd need to burn the palace down without lifting a finger? Let's unpack it all. Because what's in these pages could destroy everything the royals have tried to rebuild since Queen Elizabeth's death. And the fallout? It's already begun. The secret no one saw coming. Imagine this. It's early December. The press is distracted by holiday charity galas and Kate's glittering appearances. Harry's memoir, Spare, has faded slightly from public memory. The Sussex drama seems dormant. Then, quietly, a former palace staff member, someone who worked close to the Sussexes before the 2020 exit, turns over a sealed envelope to royal legal counsel. No media, no press release, just one sentence. I found this while packing for renovations at Frogmore. Inside the envelope, a leather journal. Soft, worn edges. No title, no logo, just initials, MM. And then the contents. Notes scribbled in emotional bursts. Dated entries from as early as 2018. Some just a paragraph. Others multiple pages long. Quotes, observations, raw emotion, sharp sarcasm, confessions, and scattered throughout, the names of nearly every senior royal. Insults? Yes. Accusations? Plenty. But perhaps most disturbing, references to recordings, tapes, meetings, conversations Meghan allegedly captured, in secret, during her time as a working royal. Suddenly, it's not just gossip. It's not just scandal. It's a matter of royal security. Why this changes everything. Let's be clear. This is unlike anything the monarchy has faced before. Sure, there have been leaks, tell-all books, explosive interviews, the Oprah bombshell, Netflix documentaries, Spotify rants. But a handwritten diary? It's personal, intimate, vulnerable, and dangerously believable. Because it isn't curated like a documentary. It isn't ghost-written like a memoir. It's not polished for the press. It's just her, on the page, unfiltered, and censored, and now, completely out of her control. Which begs another question. Who has access to it now? And what are they planning to do with it? Is Meghan a victim or a master strategist? Here's where the contradiction begins. Some insiders are calling it a tragic invasion of privacy. The raw musings of a woman who was isolated, mistreated, and forced to scribble her truth in secret. Others are calling it something far more calculated, because mixed within emotional venting are cold, strategic lines. Phrases like, "Hold this thought for the book. This narrative will shift the sympathy. Netflix will want this clip when the time comes." These aren't the words of someone passively documenting trauma. These are the words of someone building a case, crafting a weapon. So what is it? A journal? Or an arsenal? Palace response, Code Amber. Now let's talk Buckingham Palace. When word of the journal's existence reached them, and confirmed copies of certain pages were shown to senior officials, things moved fast. Security status was raised to Code Amber. That's one level below the maximum alert, typically used during terrorist threats or major cyber breaches. Why such a dramatic response? Because if the contents are authentic, and if secret recordings do exist, as the entries suggest, then Meghan Markle may have violated multiple royal confidentiality agreements, not to mention UK surveillance laws. Worse, The recordings may contain state secrets. Yes, you heard that right. Details from private diplomatic discussions, conversations between the Queen and foreign dignitaries, backdoor briefings on international events. And if those tapes do exist, and were ever made public, the consequences wouldn't just be personal. They'd be geopolitical. The journal's tone, love, loathing, or both. From what insiders claim, the journal reads like a mood ring. One entry might be filled with nostalgia for her early romance with Harry. The next, venom aimed at William and Kate. Some pages are soft, grieving, hopeful. Others are cold, sarcastic, dripping with disdain. This emotional volatility is part of what makes it so gripping and so dangerous. Because it isn't linear. It doesn't follow a PR strategy. It's honest, messy, human. And that means the audience, the public, might actually believe it. And that terrifies the palace. Whispers from within, staff knew. Perhaps the most haunting part of all. Sources say royal staff. The people working inside the palace, day after day, knew about the journal. They just didn't know what was in it. Several aides, speaking anonymously, described seeing Meghan jot down thoughts after meetings, events, even family dinners. They assumed it was for mindfulness. Or maybe her next speech. But now they fear they were background characters in a narrative they never agreed to be part of. One former aide reportedly said, "We were actors in her reality show. Only we didn't know the cameras were rolling." Let that sink in. Why this story matters now. So why is this breaking now? Why, in the last few weeks of 2025, years after Megxit, is this diary headline exploding? Because something changed. Either someone wanted it found, or someone failed to hide it. And in either case, what's inside has sparked one of the most intense royal cover-ups in decades. This isn't just a Meghan scandal. It's a monarchy moment. And the public, both in the UK and abroad, is watching closely, wondering, who will speak first? Will Meghan deny the journal is hers? Will Harry? Will the palace issue a legal threat? Or will it all unravel page by page, leak by leak, until no reputation is left unscathed, teasing what's coming? Because this isn't just about the journal's existence. It's about what's inside. You're going to hear what Meghan allegedly wrote about the Queen, about Kate, about Camilla, about Harry. You'll hear the exact moment she allegedly decided not to trust William again. You'll see the page where she questions if Lilibet was a mistake. You'll uncover the passages where she talks about psychic visions, moon rituals, and what she believed was a royal curse. And then there's the recording hints, the threats, the closing entry that might be her most chilling statement yet. So buckle in. This isn't fiction. This is a secret journal that could change royal history. And what comes next? You won't believe it. Because the first page has Camilla's name underlined. And the last page? That wasn't written by Meghan at all. What does it mean when the very first page of Meghan Markle's private journal opens with the name Camilla? Not Harry, not Archie, not even herself. Why start there? Why underline it? And why, of all people, would Meghan choose to begin her most private confessions with the now Queen consort? Was it personal? Was it revenge? Or was it something far more dangerous? That name, Camilla, bold, deliberate, and sitting alone at the top of the first page, wasn't followed by a paragraph. It was followed by a list, the Camilla list. According to a palace insider who viewed the journal under strict confidentiality, the first few lines beneath Camilla's name read more like notes from a strategist than a victim. Lines included, leans into the compassion act, but cold, calculating, always watching. Took notes at every dinner. Harry doesn't trust her, but pretends to. She's already made her alliances. I'm not one of them. Target, reputation. Strategy, slow burn. Outcome, isolation. Now pause. Let that sink in. This was not a rant. This was a profile, a breakdown, an internal intelligence report written not by a royal staffer, but by Meghan Markle herself from inside the walls of the palace. And here's the kicker. This entry was dated May 2018. 2 weeks before the royal wedding. Let that timeline speak for itself. While the world was gushing over tiaras, rehearsals, and Meghan's entrance into royalty, she was already writing like someone preparing for war. The discovery, behind closed doors. So how exactly did this secret journal come to light? The answer begins with a renovation. In late November 2025, Contractors were clearing out the last of the storage rooms at Frogmore Cottage, Meghan and Harry's former UK residence. While most of their belongings had been shipped to Montecito long ago, one room had remained untouched, sealed, locked, marked for a later inspection. It was here, behind a stack of unused suitcases and a broken desk, that a palace-appointed surveyor discovered a false-bottomed drawer. Inside, an envelope, a leather-bound book, and a post-it note with a single line. Do not open unless authorized. No signature, no explanation, just those chilling words. The surveyor, aware of the growing tension between the palace and the Sussexes, did not act alone. The discovery was escalated through royal channels. And within 48 hours, the book was in the hands of the Lord Chamberlain's office, one of the oldest and most powerful arms of the royal household. They opened it. They read the first few pages. And then, they called an emergency meeting. First impressions, shock and strategy. Those who first read the journal describe it as equal parts personal and strategic. There were entries that felt vulnerable. Meghan questioning her role, her marriage, her mental health. But then there were others. Pages that read like observation reports. On Charles, on William, on aides, footmen, even security. Describing body language, quoting conversations verbatim, and labeling people with phrases like friendly facade, suspicious intent, active threat, information leaker, probable, isolationist, neutral, for now. It was detailed, it was organized, and most disturbingly, it was accurate. According to one source, the entries matched real-time events with near-perfect alignment. Dinner menus, meeting times, conversations that had never been made public. How could she remember so much? Unless she had help. Or recordings. The palace reacts, lockdown mode. When the palace realized what they had. A complete, years-long chronicle of Meghan's time behind the gates, with names, quotes, and strategy. They didn't panic publicly. But behind closed doors, it was chaos. A security response was triggered. A lockdown on internal files related to Meghan's tenure. Staff who worked between 2018 and 2020 were quietly asked to re-sign confidentiality extensions. Even minor employees were told not to speak to the press. More chilling still, select pages from the journal were reportedly printed and hand-delivered to Queen Camilla, Prince William, and the King. What they read, we may never know, but insiders say that Camilla, upon reading her section, was so disturbed she allegedly said, "It's like she was scripting a documentary before it even began." Camilla's role, friend or foe? It raises a question we haven't asked enough. What was the real relationship between Meghan and Camilla? In public, they shared smiles. Camilla once praised Meghan's charitable work. They exchanged polite gestures. At events, they posed side by side. But was it all an act? Because if Meghan's diary is real, and so far, nothing has disproven it, then behind that polished exterior, she saw Camilla as a cold manipulator, a political force, a woman who had learned to survive the monarchy and had no patience for outsiders who didn't play by the rules. In one of the earliest entries, Meghan allegedly wrote, "She wears empathy like a brooch, visible, but removable." That line, if true, is poetic and venomous, but it wasn't the only metaphor. Meghan referred to Camilla as the shadow matriarch, the one who watches, the one who whispers, the one who doesn't need to be liked, because she already won. Harry's silence. What did he know? One of the most emotionally loaded pages in the journal doesn't target Camilla. It targets Harry. Meghan allegedly writes, with raw frustration. He still won't confront her. Says it's pointless. Says she's survived worse. But I know better. She's not wounded. She's armed. This line, this betrayal, reveals something deeper. That Meghan may have expected Harry to challenge Camilla, to defend her, to confront what she saw as manipulation. But instead, Harry stayed quiet, played nice, appeased. Why? To protect the family? Or because he knew Meghan was keeping notes and didn't want to be part of the fallout? A hidden chapter. The war begins. Toward the back of the journal, a separate section is labeled TBWB. Free letters. Mysterious. One palace source believes it stands for the battle with Buckingham. Within this chapter are entries dated after the Sussexes' official exit. And they are different. Shorter. More clipped. Aggressive. One reads, "This isn't over. They'll regret pushing me out. Another simply says, "The more they erase me, the louder my voice becomes." It paints a picture not of closure, but of strategy, of revenge. The first leak, page 7. Of course, nothing this explosive can stay secret forever. And that's exactly what the palace fears now. Because just days after the journal was secured, a single page, page 7, was leaked anonymously to a UK tabloid. It was partially redacted, but the visible lines are unmistakable. One of them reads, "She told me, with a smile, you'll never be fully royal." I smiled back, but inside, I snapped. The internet exploded. Who is she? Most assume it's Camilla. And if that's true, then everything Meghan wrote after that moment, every quote, every strategy, every tear, came from a woman who had already decided to burn bridges and take notes while doing it. But who leaked it? Now, the palace is turning inward. Someone had access to that journal. Someone scanned page 7, and someone sent it out. Was it a royal aide? A disgruntled staffer? Someone trying to sabotage Meghan? Or someone trying to protect her by leaking her side of the story before the palace spins it? No one knows yet. But here's what we do know. The leak of that one page has set off a chain reaction. Reporters are digging. Lawyers are scrambling. And Meghan? She's silent. Completely. Not a word. No denial. No outrage. No legal threat. And that silence? That's what has everyone on edge. Because what comes next might be worse. Page 7 was just a taste. The real fire? It's still hidden. And the next chapter in Meghan's secret journal? It doesn't begin with a name. It begins with a warning, scrawled across the top of the page in capital letters. Do not forget what they did. But what exactly did they do? And how far was Meghan willing to go to make the world find out? You'll see for yourself in the next chapter. What exactly did they do? And who is they? If Meghan Markle's diary is to be believed, and every leak so far says it must be, then the people she held responsible for her unraveling weren't just shadowy figures behind the palace walls. They were the most powerful women in the monarchy itself. Queen Elizabeth II, Catherine, Princess of Wales. And what Meghan allegedly wrote about them behind closed doors is now turning public admiration into national debate. Because page after page is lined with venom, not the kind that screams, the kind that whispers, the kind that wounds without raising its voice, the kind you only write when you know exactly how to cut deep. The entry that shook the room. Let's begin with one of the most talked about pages so far, page 11. According to insiders who reviewed it, it opens with a quiet, almost poetic sentence. She moves like a memory, graceful, distant, untouchable, and always cold. That's how Meghan allegedly described the Queen. Yes, the late Queen Elizabeth. And it doesn't stop there. The paragraph continues. They call her wise. I call her silent. When I cried, she smiled. When I begged, she nodded. She's not cruel. She's something worse. She's indifferent. Now pause. Let that settle in your mind. Because this isn't a tabloid interpretation. This is Meghan's own pen, allegedly. Her words. Her perspective. Written at a time when she was still inside the royal system. Still wearing the tiaras. Still smiling on balconies. But secretly, she was grieving something else. Approval. Warmth. A connection she never found with the crown. The Sandringham entry. Another diary entry, dated January 2020, just after the infamous Sandringham summit where Megxit was negotiated, reportedly includes the following. They all spoke. She didn't. She let the men crush me and called it tradition. I kept waiting for her to stop them. She sipped her tea instead. According to this passage, Meghan felt betrayed not by active aggression, but by passive permission. That Elizabeth, the woman many saw as a symbol of feminine power and dignity, stood by while Meghan was, in her words, chiseled out of history in real time. But perhaps the most explosive line from that entry? She ruled the empire. But in that room, she couldn't even defend a woman in her own family. So much for female leadership. That sentence reportedly made the palace gasp. It wasn't just criticism. It was accusation wrapped in irony. And it showed the fracture ran far deeper than the tabloids ever knew. Kate Middleton, polished to perfection. If the Queen's entries were cold and cerebral, the sections on Kate Middleton were, according to one aide, emotionally loaded and personal. One line that's already been whispered around royal circles reads, "She's lovely in the way a mannequin is lovely. Polished, silent, always perfectly positioned. Never touching the fire, but always warm from its glow. It's brutal, it's poetic, and it's aimed directly at the future Queen of England. Another diary page allegedly contrasts Meghan's own style and presence to Kate's. They love her because she disappears. They hate me because I show up. That one line may summarize the entire war between Kate versus Meghan. To the public, it's been about fashion, titles, smiles. To Meghan, it was about visibility and power. The Wimbledon incident. One entry the press has speculated on dates back to a joint appearance Meghan and Kate made at Wimbledon. They smiled for cameras, sat side by side, even shared a few light laughs. But Meghan's journal, allegedly written just hours later, paints a different picture. She offered me gum. I declined. She offered again. I realized later it was a test. Would I accept what she gave? Would I smile while chewing what she handed me? I smiled, but I didn't chew. You can almost feel the psychological chess game unfolding in those lines. Real or imagined, that level of analysis shows a woman who felt every slight, real or subtle, as a form of coded messaging. And perhaps that's where the true drama lies. Not in screaming matches, but in strategic silence. The fight over flowers. One of the most infamous Meghan-Kate stories involves an argument over flower girl dresses ahead of the 2018 wedding. The media painted it one way, royal sources another. But Meghan's journal entry? It's completely different. She cried because she didn't want Charlotte in white tights. I cried because no one asked me what I wanted. They said I was difficult. I was a bride. And then, another line. She walked out of the room. I stayed and fixed the dress myself. Is it true? No way to confirm. But if even part of it is accurate, it redefines one of the biggest early narratives, turning Meghan from aggressor to abandoned. Subtle daggers. Comparing Diana to Kate. In several entries, Meghan allegedly references Princess Diana, sometimes with affection, other times with a haunting kind of pressure. But it's in her comparison between Diana and Kate where the temperature spikes. Diana had fire. Kate has fog. Diana fought. Kate conforms. But maybe that's what survives here. That one sentence is a masterclass in emotional contradiction. Meghan appears to admire Diana's strength, but simultaneously suggests that Diana's refusal to go along led to her downfall. Then she implies that Kate's conformity, her passive survival, is what works in the royal system. So what does that mean for Meghan? That she never had a chance? Or that she chose not to play the game? This stage wife theory, one of the most disturbing diary entries, according to leaks, appears to question whether Kate's role is performance or personhood. She never slips, never rants, never misses a beat. If she's real, she's a robot. If she's fake, she deserves an Oscar. I've never met anyone so perfectly blank. This line stirred up controversy in palace circles, not just because of the insult, but because it reflects Meghan's struggle to understand how Kate could thrive in a system that devoured her. It's an identity crisis wrapped in envy. Or is it? Surprising contradictions. Not every line in the journal is cruel. That's the twist. That's what makes it more believable and more painful. Because in between the sarcasm and bitterness are moments of vulnerability and admiration. One page reads, "She made me tea after Archie's birth. Just the two of us. She was kind. I didn't expect that." Another, shorter line. "She hugged me once. It wasn't cold. That's what hurts most. She could have been an ally." And maybe that's the true heartbreak of the journal. That it isn't just a takedown. It's a love letter. Rewritten in bitterness, and almost friendship, and almost family. A hope that curdled into pain, because they could have had each other's backs. But instead, they became rivals. The page Kate never wanted seen. One of the last entries before Meghan and Harry left for Canada allegedly contains this line. "I watched her wave goodbye. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. That day, we both knew. We were never sisters. Just actresses in a fairy tale." That line alone is reportedly what made Kate cry when she read it. Because despite the sharp words, it's not rage that bleeds through. It's loss. Meghan may have wanted a sister. Kate may have wanted silence. And in the end, they got headlines instead. But then, the unforgivable line. Insiders say there's one diary quote that crossed a line even palace staff struggled to defend. It's short, it's sharp, and it's aimed directly at the Queen. They'll carve her face on coins, but I'll remember the porcelain woman who watched me drown. That's it. That one line. More than the gossip. More than the flower girl dress. That quote is what pushed Buckingham Palace to initiate legal reviews. Because it wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration, a public memory, an act of defiance against a monarch who never fought back in words. And then, the tapes. Because just when you think the journal couldn't get more damning, it hints at something more, something bigger. A line at the end of one of these Queen entries reads, "I recorded that conversation. For proof. For posterity." Wait, what? She recorded the Queen? Is that legal? Is it true? And if so, who else did she record? Because what's revealed in the next chapter will shake the very foundations of royal privacy. Because Meghan didn't just write her truth. She may have taped it. What if the most powerful monarchy in the world, polished, rehearsed, and fortified by centuries of protocol, was unknowingly speaking into a recorder? What if confidential conversations, private decisions, whispered remarks from Queen Elizabeth, and inside jokes from Charles were all captured, not by MI5, not by the tabloids, but by Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, the woman they thought they had under control? And the reason we're asking this now? Because buried deep in her secret journal, the one Buckingham Palace desperately tried to keep buried, is a single line that changes everything. A line casually scribbled in the margin. Must record. They'll lie later. That's it. 7 words. But those 7 words suggest something absolutely explosive. That Meghan may have recorded private palace conversations. And if she did, then this is no longer just a diary. It's evidence. The tapes exist, whispers inside the palace. Since the journal's discovery, one phrase has circulated in hushed tones throughout the corridors of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and Kensington. The tapes exist. No one says it on record. No one confirms who heard them. But more than one royal aide, all off the record, has admitted to seeing references to audio logs, timestamps, and playback notes in Meghan's entries. One page reportedly reads, "Listened again to April 16th convo. Charles clearly says it's not the royal way. Audio clean. Might need this later." Another. "Security briefing with Jason was tense. Recorded on iPhone. Upload to private folder. Label Gaslight 1. Gaslight 1. Are we dealing with personal protection? Or was she building a case?" Either way, one thing is terrifyingly clear. She was listening. And more than that, she was recording. The legal nightmare begins. Now let's be real. In the UK, recording private conversations without consent, especially in sensitive, high-security environments like royal residences, is a legal minefield. In public spaces, sometimes permissible. In private meetings at Sandringham, at Windsor Castle, in royal briefings, highly restricted, especially when matters of state, family succession, or international diplomacy are involved. So if these recordings exist, and if they were made secretly, Meghan may have crossed a legal line. But that raises another question. If Meghan knew the risks, why do it? Self-protection or power play? Let's consider Meghan's mindset. She's a woman entering one of the most tightly controlled institutions on earth. She's already the subject of whispers, of rumors, of condescension. She has no control over headlines, no say in statements. Every outfit, every gesture, every word is dissected. Wouldn't you want a way to protect yourself? To document what really happened? To prove you weren't crazy? That you didn't imagine the racism? That you didn't misunderstand the cruelty? From that angle, recording makes sense. It's not sabotage. It's insurance. But what if it wasn't just about protection? What if it was preparation? Because some entries in her journal don't just refer to what she recorded, but when it should be used. One allegedly reads, "Hold this back. Could be season 2 intro." Season 2? Of what? Netflix? Spotify? Or something else entirely? Something we haven't seen yet? The day of the Sandringham Summit. Perhaps the most alarming reference to recording comes from an entry dated January 13th, 2020, the day of the infamous Sandringham Summit, where the terms of Meghan and Harry's royal exit were finalized. Her note allegedly reads, "Full recording. Phone in clutch. Vibrated twice during Charles's speech. Battery held. Got it all." If true, Meghan recorded the meeting that decided her and Harry's fate, without telling anyone. That's not just bold. That's dangerous. And if those tapes were ever released, the public could hear, for the first time, Exactly how the monarchy treats those who try to step away. No PR filters. No polished statements. Just voices. Tension. Maybe even cruelty. Harry, CO conspirator or clueless? Now here's where the speculation gets even heavier. Did Harry know? Because nowhere in the leaked journal entries so far is there clear evidence that he was aware of the recordings. In fact, one passage allegedly describes Harry being visibly anxious before a particular family dinner. He fidgeted the whole time. Said, "We're not welcome here anymore." I wanted to say, "It's okay, I'm recording." But I didn't. Did she keep it from him? Or was he willfully ignoring it? It's a crucial distinction. Because if Harry did know and supported it, then everything changes. He becomes a participant in what could be interpreted as covert surveillance. If he didn't, then Meghan was acting alone. And even within her marriage, she was documenting history for an audience yet to come. What's on the tapes? The million-dollar question. So far, no actual audio has been leaked. No tapes released. No excerpts played. But based on the journal, here's what could be on those files. 8 briefings where Meghan was allegedly excluded. Comments from senior royals that could be interpreted as racist. Discussions about security, finances, and press strategy. Conversations between Meghan and palace officials where she felt gaslit. Emotional exchanges between Meghan and Harry, or even between Meghan and Kate. Comments made in confidence that could now be weaponized. And if even one of those recordings were to leak, the damage wouldn't just be reputational. It would be institutional. Because you can deny headlines. You can challenge books, but you can't unhear a voice. The palace's fear. Tapes in the wrong hands. This is where Buckingham Palace begins to panic. Not just because the tapes might exist, but because of what could happen next. What if they're sold? What if they're hacked? What if they're released in a documentary without royal approval? The fear isn't just in what Meghan said. It's what others said to her. In rooms where they thought no one else was listening. But someone was. And that someone had a smartphone, had motive, and had nothing left to lose. Netflix, already a player? One of the most curious threads in the journal revolves around Meghan's media ambitions. In an entry dated late 2019, she allegedly writes, "The narrative belongs to them. Unless I take it back, audio will matter later." This suggests forethought, that she wasn't just venting, she was documenting, curating. And who would benefit most from unfiltered royal content? Netflix, the company that signed Harry and Meghan to a multi-million-dollar deal. Could unreleased audio play into future episodes? Future projects? Could that be why the palace is moving to tighten security? And why Harry and Meghan's team has remained completely silent since the journal was discovered? One particular tape. A source inside the palace claims that one tape, referenced in Meghan's journal as London Bridge Fallout, contains a conversation between Meghan and an unnamed royal, taking place just days after Queen Elizabeth's death in 2022. In that conversation, the royal allegedly said, "It's not your time. Don't try to make it about you." Meghan's journal entry about this reads, "I wanted to scream. Instead, I pressed record." And that is terrifying. Because if Meghan recorded private grief, the monarchy's most sacred moments, then no boundary was left unbroken. Nothing was off limits. Not even death. So where are the tapes now? That's the question everyone's asking. Do they sit in a cloud? In a hard drive in Montecito? With Meghan's lawyer? With her mother? Or worse, were they turned over to a production company, bundled into a future series that hasn't yet been announced? Or are they gone? Deleted? Erased? Untraceable? Some insiders believe Meghan destroyed the recordings. Others believe she's holding them as leverage, waiting, watching, choosing her moment. And when that moment comes, we won't be able to unhear it. But the final journal line in this chapter? That's what leaves everyone shaking. Because at the end of one entry, written in red pen, not black ink like the rest, are 3 words. They'll hear everything. That's not fear. That's not grief. That's a promise. And in the next chapter, we explore why the palace is treating this as a national security breach. Because if Meghan recorded the wrong meeting, the consequences could reach far beyond the royal family and into Parliament. What happens when a personal act of self-protection crosses the threshold into national security? What starts as a journal, then becomes secret recordings, and now it's a crisis. Because according to multiple insiders, including a former royal protection officer and a legal consultant to the Home Office. Buckingham Palace is no longer treating Meghan Markle's hidden diary and alleged tapes as just a scandal. They're treating it as a threat, a security breach, a moment of reckoning. And here's why. That journal doesn't just contain personal insults. It allegedly references conversations classified as confidential under the Official Secrets Act. And if those conversations were secretly recorded, as Meghan's entries suggest, then we're not talking about tabloid drama anymore. We're talking about constitutional fallout. Code Amber initiated what that actually means. Shortly after the journal's recovery, and especially following the first leak, page 7. Senior officials within the royal household allegedly convened a private session at Lancaster House. There, under the supervision of the Lord Chamberlain, the Queen's private secretary, and intelligence liaisons, the palace reportedly issued a rare but serious internal classification. Code Amber. Now, what is Code Amber? In royal security protocol, it's a heightened alert level that suggests non-immediate but credible threats to institutional integrity. This isn't about bomb threats. It's about information leaks, compromised trust, the kind of scenario where what someone knows could be more dangerous than what someone does. In this case, that someone is Meghan, and what she might have heard and recorded is now the palace's worst nightmare. The 3 conversations under investigation. According to sources within the palace and legal commentary from former government advisors, there are 3 moments in particular that have triggered deep concern. 1. The King's pre-coronation briefing, 2023. One entry in Meghan's journal allegedly refers to a closed-door conversation between then Prince Charles and the Archbishop of Canterbury regarding coronation logistics, Commonwealth sensitivities, and private commentary on foreign dignitaries. The entry reads, "They said to keep the list short. Avoid certain heads of state. He said, we can't invite them and expect good headlines. Optics over obligation. I remember every word." This isn't just gossip. This is international diplomacy. And if recorded, the fallout could be devastating. Imagine leaked audio where King Charles is heard excluding nations from the coronation guest list based on media coverage rather than merit. Optics over statecraft? That's fuel for foreign media. 2. The Commonwealth Roundtable, 2019. Another entry allegedly describes a meeting where Meghan, as the Duchess of Sussex, sat in as part of the Commonwealth Foundation engagement strategy. Her notes include a line that reads, "Charles, they don't want advice. They want attention. We send them smiles, not change." Recorded. Dated. Again, if true, this isn't just insensitive. It's political dynamite. The monarchy's relationship with the Commonwealth is already strained in countries like Barbados, Jamaica, and Australia. If audio like this were to surface, it could accelerate Republican movements overnight. 3. The Queen's health briefing, confidential medical discussion. Perhaps the most serious breach revolves around an entry dated late 2021, a period when Queen Elizabeth's health was declining. Meghan writes, "Briefing came at 10:43 a.m. Her BP was low. Doctor said rest mandatory. Charles worried the press would spin it. Camilla said, we must get ahead of it. She didn't know I could hear them." Now pause. If Meghan recorded medical briefings about the reigning monarch without consent, she may have violated multiple privacy laws, not to mention royal protocols. And this is where the conversation enters criminal territory. Audio as intelligence, the MI5 connection. At this point, you may be asking, is this really that serious? The answer is yes. In fact, one former MI5 liaison, speaking anonymously to a UK-based investigative podcast, explained it this way. Audio isn't just gossip. It's intelligence, tone, language, hesitation, power dynamics. It reveals more than a press statement ever could. If these recordings exist, they're not royal memorabilia. They're assets. This comment reportedly led to a private consultation between royal legal advisors and cybersecurity analysts in late November 2025. The goal? To assess whether the contents of Meghan's journal and any associated recordings represented a targetable asset by foreign intelligence. Because think about it. What would a hostile power pay for audio of Charles discussing succession logistics? Or Harry voicing fears about internal betrayal? Or even the Queen allegedly expressing regret about modernizing the monarchy? That's not tea. That's national exposure. The palace legal strategy: seal and sue. Once Code Amber was issued, the palace shifted into what insiders call the seal and sue phase. Here's what that means. Seal: immediate lockdown of all remaining Sussex-related materials still stored in UK residences, including and used digital equipment, old briefcases, and cloud-connected iPads used by Meghan's staff during her active royal months. Sue: begin preparing legal action not just for defamation, but for unauthorized surveillance and possible violation of the Data Protection Act and the Investigatory Powers Act. If Meghan is found to have recorded senior royals or palace officials without permission, and if she retained that data or repurposed it, she could be held accountable under UK surveillance laws, even as a former royal, even as a foreign resident. But here's the twist. Despite all this noise, Meghan remains silent. No comment, no press statement, no legal retaliation. Why? Is it because the accusations are false? Or is it because she knows what they found and is waiting to see how much they're willing to expose? One palace insider allegedly said, "She's not panicking. That's what scares us. She's calm, like someone who already made peace with the damage." Chilling. The impact on royal staff: internal paranoia. Behind the scenes, royal staffers are panicking. Many now wonder if they were recorded. Was the lunchroom conversation between aides captured? Did Meghan tape the stylist fitting where she cried? Was that joke someone made after the Sandringham walkabout now preserved forever? The palace has since issued internal guidance. Avoid discussing Sussex-related topics on palace grounds. Do not engage with media. Do not open unsolicited emails or attachments for fear of data leaks. One staffer reportedly said, "We used to be worried about paparazzi. Now we're worried about her iCloud." That sentence alone shows how deeply this has shaken the institution. The American wild card. Can the UK even stop her? Now, let's talk jurisdiction. Meghan lives in the United States. Her journal was found on UK soil. But if the recordings are stored digitally on American servers, can the UK even force her to hand them over? The answer? Not easily. The process would involve legal requests, treaty-based data sharing, and potential diplomatic negotiation, none of which guarantees success. And Meghan? She's under no legal obligation in the US to comply unless served directly with an international order, which means she holds the power, not the palace. The nuclear option: should the palace leak it first? Here's the desperation move some advisors are reportedly considering. Leak the most harmless entries first. Frame the journal as exaggerated, emotional, and largely irrelevant. Why? To neutralize public sympathy, to control the narrative, to strike first. But that comes with risks. If the palace misjudges what's in the rest of the journal or underestimates Meghan's strategy, they could ignite a firestorm they cannot control. Because remember, Meghan is silent, but she's not gone. And if she's holding a deck of cards, we've only seen the first one. But it's the next page in the journal that triggers the final panic. Because following the security briefing entries, the ones that rattled the lawyers and spooked the aides, comes a folded page taped inside the journal. On it, a single handwritten sentence. No context, no timestamp, just these words: "If anything happens to me, release the folder titled Crown Fail." Think about that. It reads like a contingency plan, a failsafe, a warning. If Meghan is ever silenced, something else is coming. And that is why the palace is panicking, not because of what's already happened, but because of what hasn't yet. He's been the spare, the rebel, the wounded boy walking behind his mother's casket, the soldier who served on the front lines, then returned to a battlefield of a different kind, one buried under royal traditions, media storms, and emotional landmines. But what if the most heartbreaking revelation of Meghan Markle's secret journal wasn't what she said about the royals? What if it was what she said about Harry? Because buried between the fury, the strategy, and the secrets were pages that weren't written in anger. They were written in sorrow, in confession, in desperation. And every word whispered the same truth. Prince Harry was breaking. And Meghan? She watched it happen in real time, pen in hand. "I see him shrinking." Entry number 42. There's a moment in the journal that insiders say left even the most hardened palace staffers silent. An entry, simply titled Sunday Morning. It begins like this: "He's quiet again. He says he's tired. But it's not sleep he needs. It's something that died in him. No names, no timeline, just that line. And the rest of the page? A detailed emotional portrait of Harry, stripped of his royal titles, his uniform, and his media mask. Just a man, a husband, a son torn between the family he loved and the woman who loved him back. Another line. He checks his phone, hoping they've written. They haven't. Then he smiles at me, like it doesn't matter. But I saw the hope in his eyes before it faded. This isn't a tabloid tale. This is a heartbreak in handwriting. A private glimpse into the emotional cost of choosing freedom over family and the toll it took on Harry. He doesn't trust anyone. The isolation of a prince. As the journal entries progress, a pattern emerges. Harry becomes more withdrawn, more cautious, more anxious. Meghan notes, with chilling precision. He triple-checks the curtains now. Says he hears drones. He stopped answering William's texts. He says every word feels like a trap. Paranoia? Maybe. But also, self-preservation. Because by this point, according to the timeline, Harry had endured leaks from inside his own circle. He'd been painted as unstable, manipulated, a victim of Hollywood influence. And the only person he seemed to trust anymore was Meghan. But even that bond, at times, was under strain. Because in one entry, Meghan writes, "He loves me, but I see the fear in his eyes when I speak out. He wants silence. I want truth. And between us stands a crown made of thorns." He blamed himself for her death, the Diana wound. One of the longest entries in the entire journal is dated August 31st, the anniversary of Princess Diana's death. In it, Meghan documents a conversation with Harry that she calls the most honest moment we've ever had. He told me he dreams of her, that sometimes he still wonders if she's alive. That part of him still believes she's in hiding, healing, waiting. Then the devastating line. He said, "I think I killed her." And I asked why. He said, "Because I existed. Because I was part of the chaos. Because I didn't protect her." That's not just grief. That's guilt. And Meghan didn't write this to expose him. At least, not according to the tone. She wrote it like someone trying to make sense of a man unraveling from wounds the world stopped paying attention to, but never truly healed. The phone call that shattered him. According to one passage, the worst breakdown came after a phone call from an unnamed royal, though most suspect it was Prince William. The entry reads, "He took the call in the garden. I watched from the kitchen. He paced, nodded, then his face changed. I opened the door when I heard the sob. What was said? We may never know." But Meghan's next lines provide a chilling hit. He said, "They're erasing me. They want to make me into a cautionary tale." Then he sat on the floor and didn't move for 2 hours. Think about that image. A prince of the realm, sitting alone on cold tiles, crushed not by war, or scandal, or public backlash, but by his own blood. The Charles entry, when the father wounds. One of the most painful entries in Meghan's journal is simply titled, "The Garden Letter." She describes watching Harry write a letter, longhand, not typed, to his father. He wanted to explain, to apologize, to beg. I told him he didn't need to, but he said, "He's still my father, and I need him to know I still want to come home someday." The letter, Meghan claims, was never answered. Days passed, weeks, and finally, Harry stopped asking the mailroom staff if anything had arrived. He checked the mail every morning at 6. Then one day he didn't. That absence, it broke him more than any headline. The panic attack before the Oprah interview. You remember the Oprah interview? The bombshell revelations. The media firestorm. But Meghan's journal tells us something we didn't know. Harry almost didn't go. In an entry dated the night before filming, she writes, "He couldn't breathe. Said his chest felt like a cage. I held him. I told him we had to speak. But he kept whispering, 'I'm betraying them. I'm betraying Mom.'" She goes on. "He stood in the shower for 40 minutes. Not moving, just water. When he came out, he said, 'Okay, let's end this.' But his hands were shaking the whole time." That's not a man chasing fame. That's a man drowning. And the worst part? The world cheered, laughed, speculated, while he bled in silence. When Meghan got scared, the journal isn't all about sympathy. There are moments where Meghan reveals her own fear of Harry's mood swings, his silence, the long walks alone. One entry reads, "He disappeared for 3 hours. Said he wanted to get air. I found him sitting in the nursery, holding a blanket. I asked what he was thinking. He said, "If I leave, will they come back for you?" Was he contemplating divorce? Suicide? We don't know. But Meghan's next line is haunting. "I slept on the floor that night, next to him, afraid that if I closed my eyes, he might vanish." The calm after the storm. But there are glimmers of light. Entries where Harry laughs, where he plays with Archie, where he cooks, where he dances in the kitchen to Benny and the Jets. Moments where he smiles and says, "I like it here." No protocol. No ghosts. And perhaps that's the saddest part of all, that it took losing everything for Harry to finally breathe. But even then, the guilt never left. Because in Meghan's final entry about Harry, she writes, "He told me, I'm happy, but I still feel like I stole something. Like this life isn't mine. Like any day now, someone will come to take it back." And then, one final note. The very last Harry-related page contains no date, no entry, just a quote. Written in bold, center-aligned, underlined twice. He asked me not to write this down, but I had to, because one day, the world will wonder why he walked away. And I want them to know, it wasn't for me. It was because of them. It wasn't escape. It was exile. But what Meghan writes next, in the very next chapter, takes us from heartbreak to revelation. Because now, we return to the timeline. And nothing, not the interviews, the podcasts, or even the Netflix specials, prepared us for what came next. Because Meghan's journal begins to contradict the public royal narrative. History, they say, is written by the victors. But what happens when someone kept the receipts? For years, the British royal family has carefully curated its public timeline, a polished sequence of events designed to suggest civility, control, and constitutional poise. The royal wedding, the Fab Four walks, the departure, the interviews, the reunions, all set to a rhythm that makes the monarchy seem stable, even when the headlines screamed otherwise. But then came Meghan's journal. And suddenly, that clean narrative isn't just being questioned, it's being shattered. Because between the palace's official records and Meghan's private pages lies a dangerous gap, and in that gap is a story of betrayal, manipulation, and possibly a cover-up. The timeline is a lie. Entry number 88. One of the most controversial pages in the journal is dated March 2020, just after Meghan and Harry officially stepped back from royal duties. It begins with a headline from a tabloid. Sources say the Sussexes blindsided the Queen. Meghan's response: "We told her. We told them. Weeks ago. But they played the press like a fiddle and threw us under the carriage." According to this entry, Meghan and Harry had informed the palace of their intentions far earlier than publicly claimed. And yet, when the statement hit Instagram, announcing their departure, Buckingham Palace acted surprised. I watched them pretend to be shocked. They rehearsed it like a play. The only truth was our silence. If true, this reveals something massive. That the narrative of betrayal, that Meghan and Harry blindsided the monarchy, was a crafted deception. But why? To save face? To control public sentiment? Or to punish them? The secret meeting that never happened. Another glaring contradiction arises with the infamous family reconciliation claim, the suggestion that Charles, William, and Harry had a private discussion at Windsor in early 2020 to clear the air. The palace quietly leaked this. Royal correspondents confirmed it, but Meghan's journal says otherwise. Harry waited by the lake. They said they were coming. I sat in the car with Archie. After 40 minutes, he walked back, alone. They never showed. Let that sink in. If true, this means the reconciliation was not only fake, it was a cruel setup. And the leak? Intentional. A lie told to the press, while Meghan and Harry stood outside, literally waiting. The Kate Flower Girl incident. Timing exposed. One of the earliest royal rifts between Meghan and Kate was allegedly over Flower Girl dresses. The palace's timeline places this incident just days before the wedding, implying Meghan was already on edge, emotional, possibly even irrational. But the journal places it weeks earlier, and with a disturbing twist. She told me Charlotte had outgrown the dress. I offered to have it refitted. She refused, said it was not protocol, then walked out mid-sentence. Meghan continues. I cried, but not because of her, because I knew how the press would spin it. And I was right, they did. The entry is dated April 2018. The wedding was in May, which means the bridezilla image painted by certain outlets, especially British tabloids, was based on misdated, misrepresented events. And the palace? Never corrected them. The baby announcement backstab. Here's where it gets icy. In February 2021, Meghan and Harry announced they were expecting Lilibet via a public statement and a dreamy black and white photo. The public swooned. The palace congratulated them. But the journal reveals a disturbing behind-the-scenes detail. We told them the night before. Asked them to let us have this moment. They agreed. Then within hours, the leak appeared. Palace sources say couple-timed announcement for maximum PR value. Meghan's next line. They smiled to our faces and stabbed our backs before dawn. Again, if this is accurate, it changes the story completely. The palace didn't just react. They retaliated. The Oprah aftermath. Who knew what and when? The palace claimed to be deeply saddened by the Oprah revelations. They said they would privately address the issues raised. But Meghan's journal shows the royal machine had already prepared responses, long before the interview aired. One chilling entry reads, "Our team was offered a chance to preview the palace's response before the interview even aired. That's how we knew they were pretending. They weren't shocked. They were scared. Think about that. The palace wasn't blindsided. They were ready. And their public shock was a rehearsed charade. The Commonwealth lie. One of Meghan's most vocal passions as a working royal was her role in the Commonwealth. Publicly, the palace praised her speeches and engagements. Privately, she claimed she was blocked. Repeatedly, I asked to visit Ghana. They said no. I asked to speak about maternal health in Kenya. They ignored me. Then they told the press I was too political. But I was doing what they asked Kate to do the next month. This is more than frustration. This is institutional silencing. And the fact that the palace later praised Kate for similar efforts? Salt in the wound. The Charles email, a time-stamped bombshell. One entry includes a reference screenshot of an email allegedly sent from King Charles, then Prince of Wales, to his private secretary. The journal quote, he said, "Delay the security briefing. Let the dust settle. They'll learn humility." If this email exists, and if it can be matched with the timeline of when Harry and Meghan's royal security was pulled, it could constitute intentional withholding of protection, a conscious choice to leave them vulnerable, especially in Canada. Especially with a newborn. That's not just cruel. That's criminally negligent. Meghan's timeline versus the monarchy's. Throughout the journal, Meghan keeps two types of notes. Her emotional entries, the raw, reactive moments. Her date-stamped factual logs, cool, precise, surgical. It's in the second category that the contradictions become undeniable. She lists meeting times, quotes, who was in the room, what was said, what was promised and broken. One of the most damning logs reads, January 4th, requested mental health support from HR. January 6th, told it was not an option. January 11th, story leaks about Meghan acting erratic. If true, the palace didn't just deny her help. They weaponized her breakdown. The 1 week the palace can't explain. In the middle of 2019, during a crucial moment between Meghan's first maternity leave and return to public duties, there's a 1 week gap in the official royal calendar. No appearances, no briefings, nothing. But Meghan's journal is very clear. That was the week I confronted them. Told them I knew about the background briefings, the media plans. I gave them names. I gave them quotes. And I told them, if they didn't stop, I'd go public. The next entry? Harry begged me to wait. Said he still believed in the family. But that belief didn't last much longer. And then, the torn page. Right between the timeline of their final appearance as working royals, the March 2020 Commonwealth Service, and their flight to Canada, one page is torn out. Not missing. Torn. Deliberately. The remaining edge is jagged. Frayed. And Meghan's next entry begins with this. I tore out what I wrote that day. Because I can't afford to have it seen. Not yet. So what did she say? What happened? And who was there? No one knows. But her next line? That's where the timeline becomes a trapdoor. That day, the real betrayal happened. And it wasn't William. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't even Camilla. So who was it? And what did they do? Because in the next chapter, we take a turn no one expected, into the mystical, the irrational, and the